The first thing you notice when you pull into Henryville, right here at the main intersection of 160 and 31, Henryville High School. The school's literally shaved right down to the ground by the twister. And look at all the cars in the foreground. Some flipped, all smashed out, windows smashed out, not just by the twister, but also by the hailstones, as big as baseballs. People are running around right now sobbing, looking for loved ones, even though we have heard that they have everyone accounted for. But you can't convince a lot of people of that because there's still, I just talked to a man who's looking for a 13-year-old. He was sobbing, he was angry. Okay, follow me. You see more vehicles flipped over right here by Henryville High School. But the picture of the day here in Henryville is right here to the right. A school bus, not just tossed across the road, shoved right into the middle of that home right there. School bus backed right into it. And in the foreground, just behind that red truck, a school bus flipped over, as well as right here to our left. Now, insulation is littering the trees, and if you look off to the right now, you'll see, as far as the eye can see, trees shaved right off. That's because this is pretty much ground zero of where this tornado hit. The people we've spoken with who saw it actually roll in say it came in and touched down just beyond the high school, to that side of the high school, swept right across the street here and went right on as far as you can see, clipping off all these homes, collapsing this church over here to the right, and knocking down everything. Police right now are going door to door on these homes. They say they still have people trapped inside, and they tell people to go to St. Francis Church. That's where they've set up the triage center. Check that out, a riveting shot this morning of the tornado that tore apart Pekin, Indiana. Ed Torres gave us this video he recorded out of his front door. He says the storm passed less than a half a mile from his house, churning up huge pieces of debris. Hail the size of softballs covered his yard. His home escaped damage, but many in Pekin lost everything. We are learning much more about that toddler found alone and hurt in a field. She remains in critical condition at Corsair Children's Hospital this hour. And even more heartbreaking, we've learned her mother, her father, 3-year-old brother, and 2-month-old sister were all killed in the storm. Wave 3's David Williams from Pekin with more on this tragic story. After making some life-saving decisions on Friday, the school officials have more big decisions to make. Remember what they did, by the way. They saw the storm coming. They loaded up the buses. They got the kids out of school early. One of the buses wasn't going to get out of here fast enough, so they unloaded the kids. They all ran back inside, got in the office, and rode out the storm. Well, school officials for this tragedy have decided they're going to go ahead and call off school for the week. Insurance adjusters surprisingly said portions of the school interior they looked at looked fairly decent. Death toll right at 34 still. They have in Kentucky and Indiana, 21 in Kentucky, 13 in Indiana. They have ceased the search and rescue operation as of yesterday, so the death toll at 13 will hold. The last, of course, was little Angel Babcock. She was buried yesterday in the pauper section of a cemetery over in Salem, Indiana. Her grandmother singing Itsy Bitsy Spider to her as she was taking her last breaths. The terrible stories continue here now, and Steve Onosorge joins us with more on the Kentucky end of it. Years of covering tornadoes, it never ceases to amaze me what the twisters take and what the twisters leave behind. At this particular house here, the clothes are all hanging untouched in the closet, yet the refrigerator's over. Basically, if this family had been in this house when it hit, they would have been killed. They saw the tornado coming and they fled across the street to the church, got in the church basement there with about 200 other people. The curfew remains in effect here until 6 a.m. again this morning. They're going to have one more day of curfew tomorrow. That's because they've already busted a looter. Wave 3's Elizabeth Donatelli joins us now live with more on that. Liz? We know a lot more this morning now about exactly what happened. Let's take you through this. First of all, I want to show you a map. The first shooting scene was a drive-by shooting. It was at 1010 South 32nd Street. 4 were shot. 2 were killed, 2 were injured. One of the survivors then drove to 26th and Elliott. Police found him there. 90 minutes later, back at the initial shooting scene at 32nd and Garland, with 2 bodies still on the ground, people, police, the police chief, media all around, horrified neighbors. A woman got into an argument with a pregnant woman who then pulled out a gun and shot 24-year-old Makiba Lee to death. Multiple shots fired from her, then more shots immediately from police, hitting the female shooter in the leg. She was transported to University Hospital. The two men killed in the first shooting are identified as 24-year-old Tyson Mims and 22-year-old Craig Bland. Bland found on the porch of his home, Mims nearby on the sidewalk. Of the three injured, all we know is one is described as having life-threatening injuries, all three under police guard at University Hospital. Now, the most important thing to tell you this morning is the police chief, again, who was at the scene of the second shooting, said this type of violence is unacceptable, but there is no search for suspects going on. He said, quote, "We believe all the actors are either deceased or in custody." The motive, however, is under investigation, and one of the things the police chief is concerned about is retaliation. So they are stepping up patrols, stepping up the manpower. And now Scott Atkins joins us with more from what the authorities are saying. The Ironman Triathlon World Championship is this weekend in Hawaii. Many of the participants qualified for it with their finish in Ironman Louisville recently. While I didn't qualify, I was the first person ever given permission to wear a camera through the Ironman, and it shows you why they call it the most difficult one-day endurance test in the world. Surprising how much ground you can cover in one day, sunrise to sunset. 50 times a minute, 5,000 strokes in all. The worst part about swimming in the Ironman triathlon is being alone in a watery world without iPods. Until the other 3,000 athletes literally get in your face. A giant school of piranha churning up the surface. They don't bite, but they kick and they punch in the head. An escaped inmate with a loaded .38 in only his boxer shorts and socks in the cold and rain, and he has a history of forcing his way into homes and escape and assaulting police officers. So it led to one of the times of scenes that you don't really see very often. Police officers and troopers right next to a locked down hospital, combing the brush, the woods, everything. That's because you seldom have emergencies like we had this morning. In fact, first time in 25 years something like this has happened at Baptist Hospital Northeast, where they treat a lot of inmates because the prison is here in LaGrange as well. 32-year-old Chris Claxton overpowered a female KSR guard here and got her loaded gun and fled. So how could something like that happen? Baptist Hospital Northeast President Chris Rohde tells me the hospital did everything right, used the special room in ER for the inmates, and had completed treatment. He says the prison guard didn't follow proper procedure. So how long could a guy in boxer shorts and socks elude police? As I said, 10 hours went by before the capture. Scott Atkins joins us with more on that now. Scott? After fearing the worst this morning, it's really been a steady stream of good news. Only one rail car leaking, and it's only leaking a small amount. It leaked less than 1,000 gallons in a rail car that was filled with 30,000 gallons of butadiene. And that's hard to believe when you look at the tangled mess of wreckage. It's just a mile away from me behind here from Air 3. 57 rail cars en route from Paducah to Louisville. 22 cars back behind the engine. Something happened just after 6 this morning. The lead car toppled over, spilling butadiene, a highly flammable chemical. 7 other cars badly derailed, also filled with dangerous chemicals. Fortunately, a stiff north wind dissipated the chemicals fast. Temperature stayed cool, reducing the pressure inside the rail cars. Also fortunate, it happened in a sparsely populated area. Just a few dozen homes had to be evacuated within that 1-mile radius evacuation order. Everybody else within 2 miles was just ordered to stay inside. Welcome back to Oaks Day coverage here on Wave 3. You're looking live at the paddock as the horses for race 4 have just been saddled, jockeys up, and they're headed out to the track. You know, there's been a lot of talk already so far in our coverage this morning about the breeding. Some of these horses costing as much as $500,000. Well, there is a movement afoot in the horse racing industry to try to create that super horse, the perfect breeding. And let's just say you were trying to do that. Where would you start? Well, how about Horse of the Year and Preakness winner Rachel Alexandra, for instance, who recently retired. And if you're picking the male, how about for the sire, how about Curlin, right? Won the Dubai, won $10 million. Horse of the Year Preakness winner as well. Well, guess what? They did that over in Lexington, and we have a profile of that foal who was just born.